Hey there. I'm here today with
Hello.
I'm here today with Laura O'Malley, and we're gonna tell you ways you can learn how to channel. We're gonna talk about our own experiences with working with the back end of spirituality with ourselves in our own life and with other people. And Laura is a light worker, a happiness coach, and an energy alignment intuitive in Illinois. And my name is Renee LaVallee McKenna. I'm a therapist and shamanic healer. Right now I'm in California, but usually I'm in New York. And I'm really looking forward. Thank you so much for coming, Laura.
Thanks for having me. I'm
Yeah,
excited.
it is exciting. So I don't tend to use the word channeling myself. Anyway, we'll maybe talk about why that is. But why don't you talk about your understanding of channeling and how this came to be a part of your life and work?
Well, I didn't really understand it. I didn't really know about it prior to it happening. Um, I was just in a really, really bad place, a really bad place. I didn't want to be here anymore.
Were
My
you
life,
suicidal?
well, I wouldn't call it suicidal because I never considered taking my own life because I have seen what that does to the those that we leave behind. And I have experience with it. I know people who have lost people in that way.
Mhm.
And so it never would have occurred to me, but I was praying to get cancer. I was saying, all right, I'm ready to leave. Like, however you want to do it, I'm good with that. Because I was in this place that I didn't understand. Everything was perfect in my life. My husband is wonderful. I have 4 children. They are all healthy. I live in a great neighborhood. My home is beautiful. Everything was perfect. And I didn't
On the
understand why
outside.
on the outside. But I didn't feel perfect and I wasn't feeling happy. And I couldn't understand why I wasn't feeling happy. So I walked around most of the time putting a fake smile on. And when people hear my story, they can't believe it because they would have said, she's one of the happiest people I know. And I think I was kind of in that fake it till you make it mode. And I was hoping that I could fake it into reality, but that didn't happen.
Mhm.
So I was kind of just circling the drain. And I think what basically happened is I got to the point where I just completely surrendered. And I've read about this since, but I was so sad and so depressed that I just kind of surrendered. And what happened is my guides or whoever you want to call it stepped in. And I was able to follow guidance from them, even though I didn't understand that it was guidance at the time. And the way it worked out was my family was getting ready to go on a trip to Mexico. And my husband said to me, let's go to the library and get some books for Mexico. Well, you have to understand that in itself was odd because my husband had always only bought books in the airport. He had never, I don't think, had ever stepped foot in our library, our local town library. And so I said, I already have my book. You go ahead and go. And he goes, well, just come with me. I don't have a library card. And I said, well, you can get a library card. Just give him your license. And he goes, Jesus, just come with me, Laura. And I was like, what is going on? Like he was almost yelling at me. So I'm like, fine, I'll go. So I went to the library with him. And I have no recollection actually of what happened after that. But I wound up sitting on the floor upstairs in the library where the nonfiction is. And I hadn't ever been upstairs in the library. I had always been on the fiction floor or the basement where the kids' library was. And I found myself sitting in front of a stack of books on psychic mediums. And I thought, oh, that's weird. Why am I here? That's kind of cool. And so I grabbed a couple of books by James Van Praagh um, and brought them home and started reading them. And um, the message in the back of the book. I read through the book. I found it interesting. I thought it was kind of cool. I didn't necessarily fully believe in it, but I didn't necessarily not believe in it. I kind of was indifferent about it. It was interesting to me. And so in the back of the book, he had techniques to help you in your seeking, I guess it would be. And he talked about meditation, and I tried to meditate in my past, and I couldn't, to the point where I remember sitting and trying to meditate and knowing what I was supposed to do, or thinking I knew what I was supposed to do, and literally, grabbing my head because I could not turn off that loud chatter. And then I never tried again. But this time, whatever his suggestion was, but really, I think it was because I was in such a surrendered state, I sat down to meditate for the first time and felt relief from whatever it was I was suffering from, which I didn't understand what I was suffering from. But I did know that in that place of nothingness, I got there quick, I got there hard. And within probably a week and a half, I was meditating 2 to 3 hours a day, because I was so good in that space of meditation where I wasn't focusing on all the other stuff that I was consistently focusing on, which was not helping me, which was all the worry and the fear and the sadness about the world. And I don't even know what, to be honest with you. So really, meditation was the change for me. And for months, I meditated for hours a day. And at some point, another sort of thing that I believe, well, thank you. Yeah, they're telling me right now, of course we did it. We were going to the mall, and I'm not a shopper. And so my husband had to pick something up, and I walked into a bookstore, and I beelined to this area in the bookstore. Again, I don't really recall what made me go there, but again, it was like this psychic medium area. And I also don't buy books. I check them out from the library. That's my thing. And I got the book Spirited by Rebecca Rosen, who's a psychic medium out of Denver, Colorado, and walked up to the counter to pay for it. And there was a voice in my head saying, go to the counter, buy the book, buy the book, buy the book, buy the book. And it was almost like I had to get there and buy that book before I talked myself out of spending the money on it. So I ran to the counter, and I'm standing in line, and I was like, here's my card, here's my card. And I bought the book, and then I sat down in the store and started reading it, and was waiting for my husband to come back. And I want to say within probably 10 or 12 pages, Rebecca Rosen talks about this incident where she's in a bookstore, and she pulls out her journal, and she starts journaling, and she is engaging in a conversation with her grandmother, and she talks about it and calls it guided writing. And so I thought, I wonder if I could do that. And so I immediately went home and started having a conversation in a journal. And at that time, I felt like it was me just playing around and pretending. I was pretending. And this went on for several days, where I would ask questions and I was receiving answers. And it felt like my thought. I was just thinking these thoughts, and I was writing it out, until one day information started coming through that I did not know. And I knew that I didn't know the information. And so it was kind of flowing out of my thought as if it was my thought. But when I reread it, I'm going, I don't know this. And it was a story about me when I was 3. And I had gone into a movie theater, and it was, I don't remember what the movie was, and they may or may not have told me, but there, in the old days when we were young, they used to have like little mini cartoons that opened up the kids' movies, and it was a Tom and Jerry cartoon, and there was a scene where Jerry, the little mouse, is trying to run away from Tom the cat, and Tom is holding Jerry's tail, and he picks up a butcher knife, and just as the butcher knife comes down, Jerry escapes, and I went crazy, started screaming and flailing uncontrollably, and my mom and my aunts had to carry me out by my limbs. They had to turn the movie off because I was disrupting, and they carried me out. And the information that came about why that happened to me, why I was petrified, was about some abuse that I had suffered at the hand of my father's father, my grandfather, which I, as an adult, had no memory of. but also had no memory of that situation in the movie theater. And so my mom had passed. I couldn't ask her. So I reached out to one of my aunts and they said, wow, I'm surprised you remember that. Yeah. And then they told me their version of it. And I was like, all right, something's going on here that I didn't know about this. And again, then I thought, well, maybe it's like it's in my memory banks or some sort. But then they started giving me information about what had happened to me as a child. And I didn't know any of that. And really, I don't think anybody in my family knew any of that either. But the information that was pouring out was beyond just what happened to me. There was information coming out that was about my dad and about his sisters. And keep in mind, this was my grandfather. Mm-hmm. And so I knew that I was onto something. And I basically asked this crazy question one day: who are you? Who are you that's talking to me? I thought I was making this up. And they said, source. So that terrified me. And I threw my pen down and I ran up to my bedroom and I started crying hysterically because, in my opinion, I guess in that moment, to hear the word source, I'd never heard that word before, but I thought it meant God. And I thought, in all honesty, I didn't really believe that God was talking to me or that source was talking to me. I think the reason I got so afraid was because I thought I have a brain tumor. For sure, that's the answer. This is why I'm getting all this information. I am sick. I have a brain tumor. And I spent 3 days in my room crying, and I wouldn't talk to my husband, and I didn't tell him what was going on because I thought he was going to say I was crazy. And when I finally got brave enough to come back down and pick up the pen, and I asked them, who are you? I don't understand. And instead of explaining who they were again, they told me, do you really think that you're in a better place believing that you have a brain tumor than if you're speaking to source? So they referenced what I had been worried about for the last 3 days. And I said, okay, if you're source, why are you talking to me? I'm nobody. I'm a mother. I'm a housewife. I live in the suburbs of Chicago. Why are you reaching out to me? And then that was the beginning. And they basically were giving me information about, because I'm a normal person, they have access to my normal terminology, and I can deliver information in a very normal way that everybody can understand. And that's why they were reaching out to me. And this went on about 20, probably 28 to 30 notebooks full of conversations. And one day I was sitting there and I couldn't write fast enough as I was asking the questions. And my hand just kind of threw the pen down, and whoop, right out my voice came the answer to the question that I had just asked on the paper. So as far as how this came out, I think that I was so trusting of this energy that I was in contact with, and they had just given me so much information over all of these months of interaction. I trusted it. And when I felt it coming out of my voice, I let go. Again, I just surrendered, and out it came. And at that point, I knew what it was. And so I wasn't afraid. I was so excited. And then the conversation just continued with me asking questions out loud and them answering out loud. And that's really the beginning of how I started to channel, which sounds kind of crazy, but
Oh, I don't think so at all.
No,
I mean, I encourage people to write. Writing is,
I do as well,
a different voice. And so the first thing I want to say, thank you so much for that amazing story and of opening. And actually, it doesn't sound like you were very trusting, but that had to be earned, right? And trust,
yes,
should be earned, right? Because trust needs to be earned.
Yes.
Right? And so the quality, we can tap in, my experience is we can tap into all kinds of things. I have people that come to me that actually are tapped in to quote unquote spirit guides that are actually not that helpful to them.
Okay.
So, and there's a lot of voices in our head. I have people that have voices in their head that tell them to kill themselves or tell them to harm other people.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of things, there's a lot of openings and channels we can tune into. And so we really want to use our intellect and our own feelings to make sure that what we are connected with is
Renee,
trustworthy.
yeah. I was just actually going to say the one thing that they taught me when we were speaking earlier before the show, and you had mentioned, about exactly what you just said about having connectivity or the ability to have connectivity with something that maybe isn't serving your greatest good.
Yeah.
The one thing that they taught me was, and this is actually what I teach people when I'm working with them, is about our emotional guidance system,
Mm-hmm.
that our emotions are not something that just happen. Our emotions are day-to-day, moment-to-moment, second-to-second guidance about what thought we're holding in our mind. So what they've taught me is when you have an emotional response, it's not about what you're seeing outside of you, because that cannot, somebody else on the outside of you, something separate from you, cannot impose a feeling. What is happening in reality is that you are watching something with your energy deciphering mechanisms, our eyes, our nose, our mouth. These are energy deciphering mechanisms that we have. And so we're deciphering the energy that's playing out in our awareness. And then we are creating within our little energy bubble. We are the creators. So we're creating a thought about it. And sometimes it's a judgment. We're judging what's happening based on our belief system. And so our emotional response to our creation, what we're giving our attention to in our mind, what our creation is, the emotional response is delivering information to us if this thought that we're holding is serving our greatest good, or if it's not serving our greatest good, if it's a truth or if it's not a truth. And so I don't ever fear contact with somebody or something, I guess I should say, that's not serving my greatest good, because I hold that intention so strongly. And when I've been in contact with, I don't even know, I would have to go back in my journals and probably look through to see how many different energies have come through. When I'm doing videos for like social media, like on Instagram or YouTube, I will post videos, and sometimes just random energies will come in and ask if they can speak. And if it feels good to me, then I say, sure. And generally the message is it's a message of love. It's a message of peace. I have not had an energy come through ever that I did not feel good about, except one time during my journaling, the journaling time in my life before I was fully channeling. I was sitting and I was having a meditation, and I saw in my mind's eye my grandfather, the one that was sexually abusing me. And I saw him, but I didn't see him as the adult. I saw him as a 4-year-old boy. Mm-hmm. And I don't know how I knew it was him, but I knew it was him. And he was standing there holding the hand of a man who was in some kind of religious gowns. And the look on his face said it all. He had been an abused child. Mm-hmm. And so I knew it was him. I knew that he was abused. And the visual that I saw was pulling back, and then I saw the hand of the gentleman. I saw the gowns on the gentleman, and I started hysterically crying and telling this child, it's okay, it's okay, it's okay. I love you. You're going to be okay. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. And at this point, energy came in that I didn't like. Mm-hmm. And it was the energy of my grandfather, whom had passed, but I could feel his energy, and I didn't want it in the room with me. And I said, nope, you need to go. And then some other energy came in and said that they were like the mediator of sorts, and said, your grandfather wants to thank you for forgiving him. And I'm crying, and I said, no, I don't forgive him. And he said, well, yes, you do. You've already done so, because you have forgiven him by understanding what he went through. And I sat back and I started thinking about it. And I thought, wow, I have forgiven him. And I really have forgiven him. But our emotional guidance system delivers this information to us every single moment of every single day. And people don't understand that they're feeling this way because of the thought that they're holding in their mind. They think something happens.
I want to interject for a minute, because so I think the place where you were at, and I think this is a thing for people that are watching that are interested in channeling, is this discernment between what actually feels good and the stories that we might have that might be scary, right?
Yes.
So when this stuff first starts coming through, it can feel very frightening. And we don't know what it is. And we don't know if it's trustworthy, because a lot of us, like yourself, have been abused, have been, our caregivers or different people, whatever it is, our culture in general isn't always very healthy, right? So there's a lot that's not trustworthy, right? And we know that. And so really that, how does it feel over time? How does it feel? Does this feel like it's helpful? The simplest answer, I always say.
Absolutely the simplest.
Is this real? Is it not real?
Yeah.
Really, the simplest thing is it helpful? Right. And if it's helpful.
And does it feel good? And does it feel good?
And because I actually go for helpful more than feel good, because a lot of times the truth doesn't feel good. A lot of times the truth is difficult. Sometimes the truth is I need to leave my marriage. Sometimes the truth is I need to quit my job. Sometimes the truth is I need to stop drinking or doing, you know what I mean? Like, and that truth can be like, it doesn't feel good, right? It might push me to face deeper truths about myself and come away from that like happy smiley face of how we think we should be, and into deeper truths of who I am. So for me to question, sometimes it feels good. In the long run, it feels good. But really, I think the question for me, and we may have different questions, is it helpful? Is it productive? Is it constructive? Is it loving? Is it true? Right? Like those are the questions. And because the feeling that's where, for me, it can be very confusing, because often the truth is frightening. It feels like it's going to cause other people pain. It feels like it's going to cause changes that I don't understand what they might be. So sometimes the truth, although it will set me free, calls me to grow into ways that are outside of my comfort zone. Right. And so I think, for me, though, sitting down with a pen, and this is what I would encourage people to do, wherever you are, just play with this. Sit down with a pen. And sometimes it's fun even to sit down with a pen in your left hand and just write a question, and then just see if an answer comes. And it doesn't have to make any sense. This can be very playful and curious. We are all, you and I are not special. We may have, I'll just say, no offense.
I completely get it. I know what you're saying. Yeah.
I got here because I was so fucked up, right? I was an alcoholic and a drug addict and a sex addict and all kinds of like bulimic. And there was all these ways that I was medicating really my own deeper truth. And I didn't believe that I was connected with source, or, we all talk about spirituality, but when it really comes down to like, I'm a little piece of consciousness as part of a larger system. I'm actually like a cell in a great body that is connected with something that cares about me. When we actually get that as real, it's like, it's a paradigm shift. What does that mean? Right? Like, whoa. And so that's the opening for me, is to realize like, we're all connected. Now, how we connect, like you said, is different. Some people are visual, some people are auditory. Writing tends to be automatic writing, is what a lot of people call it. Tends to be a really easy slide for a lot of people. It just, for whatever reason, maybe because the hand is separate from the brain far enough that there's a little bit of an opening, but whatever that conduit is that comes out the pen. And again, sometimes writing with your left hand can be really fun. I draw pictures with my left hand sometimes, and different stuff will come through that's not filtered out by my narratives, by my personality self, by my own little lens that I see the world through, that I think is true. And really, it's just a set of glasses that can be changed, right? So when the glasses come off, different things can come through. And how, again, I think, so the two questions we would ask people, if you're going to play with this, is how does it feel? And is it helpful? And you don't have to do it, but if you're interested in opening to source, to your own deeper truth, to your own higher self, to God or goddess, whatever you call it, the doorway is there, always ready to be opened. And there's a lot of different ways to open it, and everyone can. And I think that's the work that we do, really. Yes. I've spent the last 30 years, like, really opening that door and making it as squeak free as possible, hopefully, for myself. And my job, I feel like, is to bring people through that doorway so that they can see that you can do this. I don't want people to be dependent on me, right? Because we all different levels of disability, right? A lot of people want to defer it onto someone else because we don't want to take that responsibility. We don't want to have the conversation. We want somebody else to have the conversation for us. And really the work, particularly in this stage of our evolution, I think, as a species, is to get rid of intercessors and to have the conversation ourselves. And there are lots of different ways to walk through that doorway. Writing was the first one for me. Ultimately, for me, the shamanic journey and some of the practices of shamanism that really connect with nature spirits, that's the most trustworthy for me, is to go into nature. Some people tend to connect more with celestial. There's a lot of different flavors, or, again, doorways or pathways or faces of God that can come to us. And there's a lot of different ways. I like to say there's different ways to get up the mountain. You can walk, you can hike, you can ride a bike, you can take a bus, you can take a tram, you might even helicopter. They'll all get you up the mountain. People have different preferences. You'll have a slightly different experience traveling up the mountain, but the mountain is the same for all of us, and we all have access to it.
All of us. Yeah. That is what I teach. One of the basics that I teach is about vibrational level, and how, when you're used to being at a vibrational level that's a lower vibrational level, that just means you're used to not feeling so great all the time. And a lot of people are sort of existing at a lower vibrational level, and they believe it's normal. And what happens is, when you shed a little bit of light on what it means to be a vibrational level, what it means to stand in your power, and to start being more present in the moment, so that you can kind of step outside of your form and say, all right, I'm having this thought now and it's making me feel this way, versus just having the thought and feeling that way.
Right.
In your awareness, in your stepping outside and noticing, that's where you bring yourself into the conscious present moment. And this is where I teach how to change your everyday feeling, because even if you up your vibrational level just a little bit, what happens is your whole self starts to feel better, and you don't understand why. But as you're vibrating at this higher level, and anyone that knows anything about the law of attraction, it doesn't bring you what you want. The law of attraction doesn't respond to what you want. It responds to your vibrational level. It responds to how you're feeling. So even in these little small, increments where you're starting to feel better, and you're thinking about things that feel better more of the time than you're thinking about the future, which often brings a lot of worry, or the past, which brings guilt and regret and so forth. When you come into the present moment and you're giving your attention to things right now, which, help you to become appreciative and grateful and more present, and you're not thinking about those things from the past and future that are causing the fear, suddenly your vibrational level naturally starts moving upward. It naturally does, just by giving yourself thought to something right here and now. And in doing so, things in your awareness start to shift, because the law of attraction says that unto itself, And so because you are a vibrational a little vibrational bubble, and now you're vibrating at a higher vibration just because you're not giving your attention to those fear thoughts anymore. Things in your awareness start to shift, things in your reality, things in your environment. And then you start going, wait a minute. And you start kind of receiving the validation. That's the process that I take my clients through, is once you start getting little bits and tastes of that validation, then you go, hold on, am I doing that? Am I responsible for that happening in my life? And this is where you start to understand your power here.
Yeah.
That again, and I always say to people when they come to me, all right, because they always say this. They always say, Renee, when can I come back? And I always say, well, you can reach out to me when you feel like you want to come back, but I'm going to ask them first. And if they don't give you permission to come back, then you can't come back. And the only reason that they would give you permission to come back is if they see that you are doing the work that they've already given you information about. So if somebody calls me up, I had somebody call me up and say, I told them that they had to read part 1 in The Astonishing Power of Emotions by Abraham Hicks. Okay. It was a channeled book by Abraham Hicks. And Source wanted them to read part 1, which was, I think, 35 or 40 pages. And so I sent him away, and he was gone for 3 months, and he called me and said, I need to come back. And I said, okay. And they said, and I said, oh, hold on a second. I don't know if you can come back. And he said, why? And I said, and they're saying to me, he didn't read the book. And I said,
Right.
did you read the book? He said, yeah. I said, okay, you read the book? And he said, yeah, I read the book. And I said, they're telling me that you did not read the book. Silence. And he goes, oh my God, okay, I didn't read it. Okay, I didn't read it. And I said, if you're not going to do the work, there's nothing more I can do for you. I can keep saying the words in front of you, but you have to be the one to do the work. And when you do the work, your vibrational level shifts. And that's when you come into the understanding that you don't need somebody else to do this for you, and that you are connected the same way.
Right. But a lot of people...
It's natural though, right? It's natural. And we don't want to believe it's natural. We want to give it the stamp of being spiritual, but it's, and maybe it's spiritual, yes, but it's also natural. And it's more natural than we want to give credit for it being. We want to call it something or lift it. And the better you start to feel by standing in your power and thinking thoughts that feel better, turning away from thoughts, distracting yourself away from thoughts that don't feel good, you naturally start to raise your vibrational level, and then you naturally start to feel better. And people just don't believe it's going to happen. And so when it starts to happen, they're like, this is crazy. I'm influencing my happiness. I'm influencing what's coming into my reality. And that's when you go, oh my gosh, maybe there is something to this. Maybe I am powerful. And how empowering is that when you make the connections within your own being? It's not somebody delivering information to you from the outside. That's what I love. That's my favorite part of this work.
Well, I'm glad you brought up the Abraham Hicks. I actually have created a levels of energy, emotional consciousness handout that I'll have a click if people wanted to free download of exactly what Laura's talking about with these emotional levels. And lots of teachers speak about it. Abraham Hicks has their own scale, their emotional resonance scale. And I'm a fan of Dr. David Hawkins, who has created another emotional scale. And so I've kind of conglomerated them into a really pretty one, actually, that I would screen share, but I think I would lose us if I screen shared it. So I'll put a link to that if people want to look at this resonance scale that you were just talking about, that even shifting up a little bit. And so, you know, the resonance scale that a lot of people use is like shame is like the lowest one. And then guilt is above that. And you know, fear is above that. And then hatred is actually above fear. And then judgment is actually above hatred, right? And then we move into courage and willingness and hope and love and enlightenment even, right? And so, but shifting actually from shame to guilt is an improvement. Shifting from fear to anger is actually an improvement. Shifting from anger to judgment is actually an improvement. So it's not necessarily about going from shame to joy, although that
Correct.
can happen.
Correct.
It
Yeah.
can happen. Those things happen. You know, I've had a massive spiritual awakening more than once in my life that shifted me. And it sounds like, you know, yours was a similar experience, but it doesn't have to be like that. Most of my life has been the educational variety in these pockets of lower resonance that we all have, of moving up incrementally, and a little bit. It's like a tree grows, right? Or like a flower will bloom. And so there's a lot of different information about it. Abraham Hicks has a lot, David Hawkins, Frederick Dodson also does. And so I'm really a fan, because I think this is such a practical way to think about it, that we can just shift our perspective a little bit, shifting again from shame to guilt, or from guilt to fear, which is a funny thing, or anxiety, can actually be a positive improvement. So I'm going to leave a link for that in the show notes. And we're almost out of time. So I want to ask if you have any takeaways or giveaways, whether they're, you know, practical or just suggestions for people at home from yourself in opening this way.
One of the things that the collective that I work with, so I refer to them as Darists, but they've also given me the name the Light Initiative. It's actually a name that they said I gave to them, but that's a whole nother story. But one of the things that they suggest to a lot of people is, because so many of us are so vibrationally connected to music, that we can use music to shift our vibration. Beautiful. So often I'll say to people, first of all, you want to create a playlist of music that viscerally shifts you. And how do you know what song that is? When you hear it on the radio, it's that song that you reach and you turn it up and you start, you can't not move your body. So that song is a vibrational equivalent. This is what the Light Initiative has explained to me, with your higher self. There's a resonance. And so that's why some of us will have shared songs, but none of us have the same list, because each of our higher selves obviously is different. And so when you're in the face of contrast, and something is happening and you feel yourself starting to lean into that lower vibration, you feel yourself dipping into anger, something like that, stopping in that moment. If you can be aware, I feel myself moving into a feeling that I don't like, stopping yourself in that moment and saying, excuse me for 1 sec, I need to run to the restroom, you know, run to the restroom, throw in your headphones and listen to that song. Because what happens when you are taking action to physically shift your vibration is you're making that choice to just stop for a second, get your vibrational level higher. And the answer to this problem is at this higher vibrational level. So as you're doing this work and you shift yourself upward and you're starting to feel better now, clarity about that other thing has access to you. Because the answer to the problems, the answer to the contrast that comes in your life, it's not at the vibrational level of the problem. It's at a higher vibrational level. So when you do this work and you shift yourself, often what will happen is when you return to the situation, either you have clarity about what's going on, or that person is gone. They haven't waited for you anyway. But it ultimately is you learning not to engage in that energy if it doesn't feel good. You know, there are lots of techniques. The music is one that they teach all the time. They'll also say, like, if you can look at the situation and understand that this person is vibrating the same way you're vibrating, but maybe at a different level. And if you can look at this person and say, oh boy, there's a low vibration going on over here, not in a condescending way, but in, you know, in a way that you're trying to be the love in the situation. You're trying to hold
it's just what's
higher
true.
Perspective. Exactly.
It's just what's true, right?
It is what's true.
We're going to have to wrap. What's your final word?
Oh, my final word is, if you have any interest in reaching me, you can find me at www.getintothelight.com. That's where you can find me. I don't know. My intention is to help you be happier. That's what my intention is. So if you're not feeling happy, there are ways and techniques for you to learn how to become a happier person. Awesome. That's it.
Awesome.
Thanks for having me.
It's so great to have you. And so I hope we've given some suggestions and some stories that were helpful. And you can reach out. I'll have Laura's link in the show notes, and that handout about emotional resonance that I talked about, and make a good playlist for yourself so we can get into the light. Awesome.
Thanks,
Laura,
Renee.
thank you so much for coming. Really,
thanks for having me. This was awesome. What a great conversation.
Really fun. And we'll connect offline. I'd like to know if you have anybody else that might want to come on here and talk to me, and I'd love to talk to you more.
Oh, I would love to give that information. I have lots of woo-woo friends.
Awesome.
All right, thanks.
All right, Laura, have a blessed day.
You as well.
All right, dude.
All right, bye.
Bye.